WCCO News starts now with breaking news.
A terrifying scene on the tarmac in Toronto. A Delta flight from Minneapolis flipped over after an incident while landing. Video shows passengers jumping out of the emergency doors and running to safety. We're told multiple people are injured, but remarkably, it appears all 80 passengers and crew on board survived. It is unclear, though, what caused the plane to flip over, but a winter storm did hit Toronto over the weekend. We want to get right to Susan Elizabeth Littlefield in the newsroom with the latest. Hi there, Susan Elizabeth.
Hi, Amelia. Now, this hits so close to home for so many of you watching right now. I mean, so many of us fly out of MSP and so many of us fly Delta. It's the largest airline here. Well, I want to give you some news. I just got some good news from the CEO of the airport in Toronto. As we have reported, everyone survived, like Amelia just said, but 17 people are injured. But here's the good news. We are now told that none of those people are listed as critical. That's the latest report. 80 people were on board that plane, 76 passengers, 4 crew members. Delta operates the Endeavour Regional Airlines. That's what that jet was that you're seeing right there. The plane coming in to land and ending up completely flipped upside down, as you see in this video. Some of the people were able to actually walk off of the plane okay, including John Nelson. He's a Minnesotan who captured this Facebook video. Moments ago, the president of the Toronto airport shared this update.
The plane was carrying 4 crew and 76 passengers, among them 22 Canadians. The other passengers were multinational. Airport emergency workers mounted a textbook response, reaching the site within minutes and quickly evacuating the passengers. We immediately halted further arrivals and departures on our remaining 3 runways. Those runways were reopened at approximately 5 p.m.
Well, it's Toronto, it's Canada, it's winter. So as you can imagine, it is cold there. A lot of people wondering what the weather has to do with this. We don't know yet, but we can tell you it was 17 degrees at the time of the crash, very cold. And there were high winds. We're talking 40-mile-per-hour gusts about the time of this incident. Now, the scene was especially chilling knowing that 67 people died in a mid-air collision in D.C. just 3 weeks ago, and there have been a string of smaller plane accidents since then. Governor Tim Walz says that he is in touch with Delta right now. Delta is saying they're going to continue to update us. We will continue to update you because, again, we know this is personal. Also, a note as people are taking away these images of the importance of wearing a seatbelt on a flight.
All right. Thank you, Susan Elizabeth. A man who was plane spotting outside the Toronto airport said that he saw black smoke and was shocked to see the plane upside down.
We rushed here to check out what exactly was happening. So I was walking to this fence, and I and I could see a CRJ that is possibly crashed on the airport. The airplane is flipped. According to what I've seen, and my friend says there are a couple of people evacuating from the airplane.
For some perspective, it is about a 2-hour flight from Minneapolis to Toronto's airport near the shores of Lake Ontario. Let's go now to our David Schumann, who is at the MSP airport. And David, what impacts are you seeing there?
Amelia, there have been changes to the departures and arrivals board all afternoon. We've been monitoring it, but things appear to have finally settled. If you look at the board, there's Toronto up there. There were 2 flights that were canceled to Toronto, and then 1 was added, and then we found out it was canceled. Delta said all of the flights in and out of Toronto were canceled today. Now, some of our eagle-eyed viewers might see that it doesn't say canceled on the board, and there's not a gate assigned. We're not totally sure who is responsible for updating the board here at MSP Airport, but we can assure you that it is canceled, that flight out to Toronto, and you just got to hope that anyone who's on that flight got the message, right? Now, we have been talking to people flying wherever they're going, just about how they're feeling about flying right now, being in the air with all the incidents and accidents that Susan Elizabeth just mentioned. It was kind of a mixed bag from people as to how they're feeling, a little bit of an uncomfortable topic to talk to them about as they're getting ready to board a flight, but take a listen to what some people had to say.
My hairs have been up on the back of my neck a little bit recently because of all the incidents and cutting of air traffic controllers.
I'm not really worried about it. I think that was kind of a fluke thing. I think the air industry in general is pretty good.
I'm not overly worried. I think some people do, but when you think about the safety of air is still safer than driving in a car.
If you are feeling a little tense about flying, a little nervous, that is of course understandable right now. We are going to continue to stay here talking to people, and we'll bring you the latest tonight at 10 from here at MSP Airport. Amelia?
All right. Thank you, David. We'll see you tonight. As you heard the FAA say that the Transportation Safety Board of Canada will lead this investigation. Chris Van Cleve is a senior transportation correspondent for CBS News, and he said it's amazing that there were so few injuries.
We understand that some federal officials are hearing reports of some injuries here, but again, the airport says everyone is accounted for. There are images trickling out that show this CRJ 900, which is a regional jet. It was operated by Delta's regional carrier Endeavor, but operating as a Delta flight. The plane appears to be upside down, the wings and tail ripped off, the nose landing gear still in place. People are being taken off the airplane. Medical crews have responded in Toronto. The Toronto Pearson Airport had gotten a significant amount of snow over the last week. In fact, over the weekend, they were working quite hard to clear. It had been about 7 inches of snow going into yesterday. So weather conditions there will be something that will certainly be looked at here. But we're looking at another U.S. airliner. This one operated as a Delta connection flight that had an accident while or shortly after landing, in this case in Toronto. We don't know how many people are on board yet, but the airport says everyone is accounted for. We hear that there may be some injuries, but it does look like the cabin of the airplane, the passenger area of the plane, remained intact fully when whatever went wrong, and it went wrong with enough force, it appears, to have ripped the wings and the tail off the airplane, and it came to rest there on a runway in Toronto. Obviously, this is an unfolding situation. A lot of questions about how this could have happened. What could have resulted in this plane essentially flipping over as it was touching down or shortly after touching down from Minneapolis-St. Paul.
It has been a tough month for the aviation industry. This is at least the 4th major crash in North America in recent weeks. A plane and Army helicopter collided near the nation's capital on January 29th, killing 67 people. 2 days later, a medical transportation plane crashed in Philadelphia, killing the 6 people on board and another person who was on the ground. And 10 people were killed in a plane crash in Alaska. Robert Sumwalt is the former chairman of the National Transportation Safety Board. He told CBS News that the U.S. and Canadian government will now be working together to figure out what happened.
The Transportation Safety Board of Canada does an excellent job, and the NTSB will be invited in as an accredited representative since it is a U.S. registered airplane and U.S. operated airplane. They will work hand in hand together to determine what happened here and, most importantly, come up with recommendations to keep something like this from happening again.
It's too early to say what caused the plane to flip, but weather may have played a factor. CBS News also spoke with former NTSB Vice Chairman Bruce Langsberg, who talked about how a crash like this happens and how weather conditions might have played a big role.
I think the wind is quite possibly a factor. We're dealing with obviously snow and ice on the runway. And if there was a landing gear either malfunction or damage to the gear as a result of a hard landing, this can all cause the aircraft to go out of control. And as you've already pointed out, it is remarkable, given the circumstances, that everyone got out, some with some injuries. And I guess it's also remarkable that nobody decided to take their luggage.
I want to ask you about the weather conditions, winds gusting over 40 miles an hour. How much of a problem would that be? And also winds due west, which is a crosswind.
Well, as a pilot myself, one of the most challenging activities that a pilot can undertake is dealing with crosswinds, because the aircraft wants to weather vane into the wind or turn into the wind because of the tail. And so the pilot has to counteract that by pushing simultaneously on both the rudder pedals to keep the airplane going straight and then putting a wing down in order to keep it from drifting off the runway. So it requires a very delicate balance. And the greater the side component on the wind, the more challenging it's going to be. And of course, the wind isn't steady, it's going to be gusting. So just about the time you think you've got everything squared away, another gust comes along or the gust stops. So the pilot is constantly fighting to keep the aircraft properly aligned. And in airline aircraft, typically they will come down in a crab relative to the runway and then straighten the aircraft out and roll into a cross control situation. And I realize that's getting pretty technical now, but a lot of things are happening very, very quickly. And if it isn't worked out in terms of timing, or there's a gust at exactly the wrong time or a downdraft that dumps the airplane onto the pavement, that could potentially cause the landing gear to fail, in which case now you start to have a crash scenario develop very, very quickly.
Do you have a message for people who are wondering right now the landscape of aviation safety?
I think that's a normal question for people to have. We've had an awful lot of unpleasant exposure. The worst and most prevalent crash was obviously the one at Washington Reagan National between the helicopter and the American Airlines aircraft. All of these crashes do not seem to have anything in common, but we have a series of events that occur. We lost a medevac aircraft in Philadelphia. That one is probably going to be the most difficult to ascertain what transpired. But you know, flying is without question the safest mode of transportation. To put this into perspective, and I'll do just a little editorializing here. You know, we've had several major crashes, 67 people lost in the DCA crash. We're killing over 100 people a day on the U.S. highways. That's the equivalent of 3 to 5 airliners a week. And so if you're concerned about safety, driving your car is far more dangerous than it is to go on the airlines. That said, you know, the role of NTSB and of course, the airlines and anybody who flies aircraft, which I do myself, we take safety very seriously. And there's always something to be learned from these events.
Leaders from around Minnesota tonight are responding to what they've learned about the disaster on the runway. Governor Tim Walz issued a statement a couple of hours after the plane flipped on that runway. He said, "I'm in touch with Delta after a flight taking off from MSP crash landed in Toronto this afternoon." He then continued, "I'm grateful to the first responders and professionals on the scene." Senator Amy Klobuchar issued the following statement about the crash. "Thinking of those on the Delta flight that left Minneapolis and crash landed in Toronto, thankful for all the first responders and those on the plane who worked to get everyone to safety and those injured to care. We must get to the bottom of what happened." And finally, Republican Representative Tom Emmer said he and his wife are, quote, "praying for the passengers and crew who were aboard Flight 4819 and are pleased to see initial reports that no lives have been lost." Incidents like this can leave a lot of us with questions about safety. So we are now joined by WCCO's Frankie McLister, who worked in the aviation industry. He's here to share some perspective about that. Frankie, thanks so much for joining us. What does an airline do during and after an event like this unfolds?
Yeah, Amelia, there are a lot of questions about this and during and after an event. So right now, if you were to be working at Delta or in Denver, in my experience working in the airline industry, these airlines prepare for things like this, obviously hoping to never, ever have to ever activate the plans that they create to prepare for a situation such as this. So a lot of airlines have a plan called a EP&R plan. That stands for Emergency Preparedness and Response. So when this occurred, that was likely activated and activated to all the employees that are a part of that plan. Now, this can just umbrella down to, the social media managers, the people that are boots on the ground at the airport. This is a little tougher of a scenario because this is in Endeavor Air, sorry about that, which is a subsidiary of the Delta Airlines group. So it's a regional partner. It is kind of tricky here because you book the flights on delta.com, but it's run by a regional operation. So Delta, their headquarters is in Atlanta, is clearly right now working very close with Endeavor, which is in Minneapolis, actually, which is where this brings us a local connection. So they're just working between the two. They are releasing statements, getting them approved. Likely there is an entire group in Atlanta at the Delta headquarters that is going to Toronto as we speak. That was probably, given direction right away. And there are people that are already prepared to go there to be boots on the ground. There are likely a lot of families that are affected. They're going to have people that are helping those families because this isn't something that's just going to be happening today. There's going to be long-term effects of this, and airlines prepare for that, and they are well aware of that too. So after the fact, as time goes by, they're going to be looking back at what went wrong, obviously working very close with here in the United States, the FAA and the NTSB, but obviously these are different agencies because you're dealing with Canada. So, and that makes it a little tricky too, Amelia. I want to put in perspective that there were all of those passengers on the plane, they hadn't cleared customs in Canada yet. So that brings in a little more logistical factor that if they are being, automatically admitted to ERs and hospitals, the ones that were injured or just needed attention, they have to realize that they also haven't been admitted to Canada quite yet. So that'll be a little interesting to see how all of that is dealt with. That differs from the American incident we had at Reagan National just weeks ago.
We talk about that incident, and then there was an incident after that with a medical transportation, and then there was one in Alaska. Can you put it into perspective a little bit for people who are looking at this? Should they be afraid to fly right now? Maybe they are afraid to fly right now.
Yeah, and that's completely valid, right? All of these questions happen up in the air. The weird thing about this is if you are feeling a little unsafe to fly, these incidents have been happening kind of in a sense, boom, boom, boom. So if you're asking me, should not give you any more hesitation to fly. Things happen. To put it into perspective, think about how many flights are in the air. With one major airline in the United States, they at least have 1,500 takeoffs and landings every single day. And when you see a picture of an aircraft that's upside down like this, that is completely unacceptable and very scary. But think about your roads, how many cars are on the roads, and all of the accidents that happen that you don't hear about like this. So if you can put that into perspective in your mind to help you kind of ease your way into boarding a flight in the future, I think just trusting that these people are qualified, these people are trained. Not only, in this situation are the pilots and flight attendants trained, which, as you see, all 80 people were accounted for. So that's huge right there. And that shows all the training that goes into it. So just trusting that these people are there, they're prepared, and just having hope and faith that, you're not going to end up in one of these situations.
Well, Frankie, we certainly appreciate you joining us, giving you your perspective and a little look behind the scenes, too. Thank you.